Everyone, welcome to today's webinar. Before we dive into today's content, I was just going to give you a quick introduction to who we are and some of the background as to why we're running today's session. Stuart, if you just want to jump onto the first slide there. For those that may be new to KIK, we are one of the UK's leading independent technology partners. We were founded in 2015 and we're recognised as a trusted IT solutions partner. We've got expertise across cybersecurity, which we'll be covering today, cloud technologies, and also Microsoft-powered technologies. We work closely with many non-for-profits already, and we understand the balancing act that you all face. So everything from protecting sensitive information, maintaining trust with supporters and service users, and keeping your critical services running, all while operating within the tight budgets and the competing priorities that we know you have. By way of introducing our presenters today, so I'm Joe Scott, I'm Account Director at KIK ICT Group, and I'm joined by Stuart Beattie, who is our Principal Technical Architect and heads up our cybersecurity practice here. In terms of what we'll be covering, we'll start with the real world impact of cyber incidents like data breaches and ransomware. We'll be looking at how the threat landscape is evolving, including especially the role AI now plays in making attacks faster and more convincing. We'll also be talking about why attackers target organisations and why in particular smaller organisations and not-for-profits are now not necessarily under the radar for those attackers. And then we'll also move into the practical steps that you can take and plus how to plan for an attack so you're prepared if something does happen. We'll look to finish with a bit on how ourselves at KIK can potentially help you, and we'll lastly cover any questions that might come up throughout the session. So one thing that is worth pointing out is that throughout today's webinar is a question box you can use to raise questions at any point. Please feel free to drop them in as we go. I think it's just on your right hand side there, and I'll look to pick them up at the end. Sure, over to yourself.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks everybody for joining us today. So we've got a few slides to just go through. As I say, just make sure if there's any questions, we want to make sure that everyone gets all the answers they need today to help them with any cyber issues or cyber questions they have. So make sure you can ask questions. We'll cover them off at the end. But first of all, I just want to dive straight in to talk about the impact that cyber attacks can have in organisations, especially kind of smaller organisations, where even a small attack with a fairly small footprint could be of a huge impact and be quite catastrophic to a lot of the organisations that we're talking to today. So first of all, I just want to look at the kind of different types of attacks we generally see, so we can know exactly what we're talking about and what kind of attacks we're looking at. And some of the kind of things we have here haven't really changed much over the past few years. Still, things are kind of pretty much staying the same. So the first one we've got is kind of looking at is a data breach. So data breach is where somebody's managed to access to your organisation and they've accessed your information, they've stolen that and taken it offline, with the whole idea that they can then use that information to try and sell it to someone else or to use it to then cause some additional damage to your organisation. They can happen in lots of different ways, and we'll talk about how that can happen later on, but it's pretty much that anything you lose that could be of importance. So if you imagine that the data that you have could belong to either your clients or to your donors or to some organisations you work with, and as soon as that information is then available and when people know it's came from you, then it means that you've got a bit of trouble, because you're then the person who's let all that information out into the outside world. And you then have to go back and start talking to the people who's been involved in that data breach and to tell them that you're not as trusted as they assumed you were, and you've then let other people see the information that they thought they'd given to you in good faith. So it's a real problem with your reputation, and people then start to think on you as not as trustworthy as you, or the organisation is not as trustworthy as you could have been before. At the top of that, you've also possibly got the option that you need to talk to the Information Commissioner's Office if you've had a data breach, to let them know that some information's gone. So there could also be some financial impact in that. But we generally see from data, it's the reputational damage is the big thing. And this couldn't just be, for example, where a user has managed to get in, they've stolen your full database, or they've emptied out your file server with all the information that's there. It could be as small as being someone who's accessed a single user mailbox through a phishing attack. So if you imagine that maybe someone in finance or somebody in your donations team has had their mailbox scammed, and then someone's had a chance to go through and look at some of the mails that are there. So that could be financial information in there, it could be information about your clients, it could be very personal information as well that's been lost. So it has a really big impact on that. The next area we kind of look at is on the good old ransomware attacks. So these were kind of really big a couple of years ago, where everybody knew about them and everybody knew the consequences of having ransomware. But those attacks, unfortunately, are still ongoing. So it's still not unusual to kind of slowly see or kind of log into your systems in one day and then suddenly see messages saying that your data's been stolen and give you some options where you can go. So this one's not really more about a reputational risk as the first one was. This one here is more about the interruption of how your business is going to operate. So if you're running and you're looking at, for example, looking after clients, as many charities are your staff able to access the information they need to be able to go and look at the clients? For example, they could have lost access to calendars where they've got a list of things they need to do. It could be they've lost access to telephone numbers or contact details. If we're looking at donations and people actually giving you money, it could be that we've lost details of your vendors, so you can't then go out and kind of contact people to talk to or anything else that they might need to do their work. So we've got a couple of things that are happening there. So are your staff going to be sitting around doing nothing because there's nothing they can do? They have access to information, but also people trying to contact you could hit a brick wall and they just assume then that you're not interested in talking back to them. So again, there's a bit of reputational damage in there, but it's primarily around how your organisation is going to survive that. And if you have had a ransomware attack, how are you going to recover from it? Do you have backups in place? How long is it going to take to get those backups to restore? Have you checked that those all work okay and that you can get things back? Is there maybe a system that you've missed that doesn't have a backup and you don't have any way to get that information back? And think about how that's going to affect your organisation. And again, to a certain extent, the reputation of your organisation if you're offline for quite a while. The good news though, or the bad news, depending on how you look at it, from the hackers it's great news, but from you it's probably bad, is that now quite often we're seeing attacks where both things happen simultaneously. So one of the kind of new things is what we call double extortion. So while someone's busy encrypting all the information on your file servers or your email servers or any other systems you have, they're also stealing the information and uploading it to the dark web at the same time, which means that you come along and they say, okay, we want to get your information back, so we charge you, £10,000 to unencrypt your information. You say, well, we're very clever because we've got really good backups and we've managed to get all the information back. And then they come back and say, well, in that case, we've still got all your information. We're going to release it to the dark web unless you pay us a bit of a ransomware attack as well. So multiple ways of getting you at the same time. So that's the kind of impact we're looking at for your customers. That's why it's so important. But let's look at actually what is happening and what the kind of effects are, or what the kind of current ways that people are being attacked and how things are running through. So the first thing is attacks are happening more and more frequently, and it's part of the whole kind of modern technology, and especially around artificial intelligence we're going to talk about today, where things are running a lot faster than they used to. And at the moment, we've done some stats that says that an attack happens to each organization every 39 seconds. Now, that could be every 39 seconds that somebody's trying to attack your firewall. It could be that somebody sends you phishing emails. It could be somebody's trying to log into some of your systems using credentials if they've stolen from somewhere. But every 39 seconds, it's somebody's trying to attack you. So this is happening in real time. And that's 24/7. They don't take time off at the weekends or overnight. So you have to be aware that your systems are being attacked and people are trying to get into you all that time. It does sound a bit fanciful. So if you want to see that, then have a look at your firewall logs. And it's scary how often you see these attacks and people trying to get through into your systems. But the biggest thing here is that the fact that cybercrime, it used to be, small people just trying to do it for fun. It's now big business. And it's a multi-trillion-pound business worldwide with people making money out of all your misery of you being hacked. And it's, organised crime is involved in all this, along with some government organisations as well, where they're trying to hack against other organisations. But if you imagine that back in the good old days where you had the mobsters all running around, these guys are still there. There's still people trying to make money out of that. They're just all doing it in cybercrime and through cyber attacks at the moment. And these organizations are amazing. You can do some searching around if you Google for them. We've heard stories of people who have had jobs. They went through a kind of normal recruitment process, developers who've written some code, and then it turns out they've actually been working for one of these cyber attackers. These organizations are big enough, they actually have their own HR departments and payroll departments to make sure that things tick along. So we're really talking about things that work like big business. The other area though where things are really kind of moving on is with AI. And I'm sure you're hopefully using AI in some of your own business works just to try and make sure that you can streamline how you do things and get things running easier and faster. The bad news is though that AI has been used by the bad guys as well. And it's mean that they can really speed up their attacks. They don't have to spend as much time concentrating on how to make attacks work. They can get the AI to do a lot of the work for them. So it means that then you're under much more pressure to be on top of the attacks because these guys' attacks are improving. It used to be that you could look at a phishing email and think, okay, that's got a spelling mistake, the grammar's not great. Not now, because AI will have been through there and wrote it to make it much more personable and much more difficult to try and spot what's going on. And all faster for the end user, or faster for the attackers who are actually pushing those attacks through. So let's just have a look at how the attacks have actually changed over the past probably couple of years or two. And we have seen some big changes here. So traditionally, attacks used to be kind of split into two different areas. So the first one was the kind of shotgun attack or the wide-reaching attacks. And that would be things like phishing emails. And the idea here was literally, it's like throw your hook into the water and just see who comes back and attacks. And it's where the term phishing comes from. And for this one might be things like emails where you send them out with a link on them. And the whole thing here was scale. So you'd send out an email to tens or hundreds of thousands of users with a link on it. It wasn't really personalized. It was just a kind of hope that somebody would click on it. If they clicked on it, then you might be able to either attack them through installing some software or grab their username and passwords or some other. The attacks varied, but they were pretty much, the whole idea was it was a very wide-ranging and it was a scale thing, trying to get people to come in. On the other side of that, there was much more targeted attacks, and these are the ones where you can imagine from movies or films where people are, searching out people they can attack and look for. It might be, someone who's got a grudge against a particular company. It could be a kind of espionage type thing where they're trying to get information from a company because they, want the latest information about how they're doing something or a new product. But these attacks were very targeted. It took some time to research everything, so people will be going through, looking at who worked in the organization, trying to figure out how they could get access to there. And it was a very personal or very kind of intensive job. So it wasn't something you could do for absolutely everyone. You really had to have a target in mind. And even though you could farm that work out to somewhere cheaper and you don't have people working on it who are badly paid, it still took a lot of time and effort to try and make sure that you got those jobs. So, for example, it'd be tracking down who the CEO was, where they were, who their contact details were, how they answered emails, where they were on holiday maybe, and who worked for them, who might be new employees, all these kind of good things to try and figure out how they could make an attack that would get them maybe a higher payout. And again, the difference between the two here is that the wide-reaching attacks are pretty much looking for sort of cheap but scalable payouts, whereas the targeted attack is looking for a much more higher volume or higher value payment that will come back out of that. So that was how things used to be before AI came along. Now we've got to a stage where we're kind of combining them together and we're getting wide-ranging attacks which are also very targeted and very personalized. So how does this actually work in reality? So if you imagine all the data that's out there, so think of things like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and even some of your own internal, your own websites. So let's look at the information we might have. So LinkedIn, you maybe have information there that links you as a personal user to your company because you joined their company account. You might have people that you follow, or you might have information in there as to who you work with and who your colleagues are. So people can then work out through that what the organizational structure would be. If they can't work out the organizational structure, then they might be able to look at, for example, you have a post that says that you've started to work for the new department, and someone else might say they've had an improvement, or they've had a new job and they're now the head of a department, or they're working with XYZ and they thank them for that in the post and tag them. There could also be some posts on your personal or your company website saying that you've got a new person who's starting in the organisation. You might even have some kind of organisational charts there that let people see who works and how the organisation is built and who reports to who. So that's on the kind of organisational side of things. Now, if we then take the kind of personal side of things, and quite often people use the same email, so it's easy to link the two together. Someone might be posting on Facebook or Instagram with their holiday picture, saying they're having a great time at a conference, or they might be saying that they're off on the beach and having a drink. And they'll also say, maybe we're off in, somewhere exotic, somewhere in the States or somewhere in the Far East. So there's a time difference involved. So these are the kind of things that used to be used by targeted attacks. But now with AI, we can feed all that information into an AI model, and it will very quickly be able to figure out who joins together, who works with who, how to put that together. And then we can take that forward and then say, okay, now do a more targeted attack. So, for example, find out people who've just joined a new job, figure out where their manager is, wait until you can see that their manager's offline or going to a holiday somewhere, or somewhere that make a good excuse for sending an email, and then send a targeted attack email to them automatically saying, we see you're on the beach, or I'm on the beach, I need to make a payment, can you please send me some gift certificates and send it my personal address because I'm out and about. Very personalised, very fine-tuned, following the same algorithms because we've got some idea of how that person normally speaks normally in their normal email communication, and AI does it all for us, and it's really quite scary. The other thing we're starting to see again with these modern type attacks is, even if you don't have the skills in-house, you can get someone to do it for you. So hopefully you might have heard of things like software as a service. That's like your Office 365, where you can buy access to software and it's hosted on a platform for you. Well, cybercrime as a service is actually a real thing. You can go out there, you can find somebody who will run a phishing attack for you. You just give them your credit card number, or you probably say pay them in Bitcoins to run the service for you for a couple of months. You supply them some information, say who you want to target, and they'll do all the work for you. You don't even have to write or host any code or do anything fancy. You just pay the bill and then get the money back at the end of the day. So it's really quite a scary way how things have changed. And as I say, AI is really kind of the linchpin that does all this, because a lot of the code and a lot of the work around that is also written by AI engines at the same time. So again, on to kind of why the attacks actually happen. So we've looked at how they happen, how they run through. So a lot of things have really kind of stayed the same. So there's not been a huge amount of change here, but it's pretty much always around how you can make some money. So I say things haven't changed, but back, like 15, 20 years ago, a lot of the cyber attacks were almost down to people having fun. So you get a lot of the cyber kiddies who used to kind of sit in their bedrooms and write some code and send it out there just so they could see, like, maliciously see what was happening as this kind of virus spread throughout the whole world, and get some feedback and get some kicks and tell their pals, oh, this was me that did this. Nowadays, that's all changed. So it's all into kind of how people can make money and how they can get some cash back out of your misery. As I say, it is all big organisations, and they're all multinational. So we're looking at, how people can make money out of your misery is the big thing. And the other kind of why attacks happen, scalable and low risk. So for people who are doing this, it's actually quite a cheap way of getting money in. So if you want to make some cash, you don't really have to spend any money. So you don't have to spend money in sending an email. You just get the infrastructure and you can rent that in on a monthly basis to send all these emails out and automatically get all that cash back from it. So the main reasons why they do this is just to try and get as much money as possible. So you really have to think is why people are trying to do that to you. So we'll move on to kind of the last fallacy we want to look at today, and it's people quite often think, well, cyber attacks happen for bigger organizations. We're just a small organization, so it won't happen to us. Well, I hate to tell you, but cyber attack happens to just about every type of organization, from large corporates down to two-man organizations. And especially when we talk about things like schools, non-profit organizations, and smaller organizations, there is much to be or likely to be a target as any large organization who's out there. And the main problem is that whereas maybe a large organization has got the budget and the time and the staff to help protect them, you smaller organizations probably get limited budgets, so therefore you don't have as much money to help protect yourself from that. And if you do attack, we talk about the reputational damage and the offline time. it can be a real big issue for your organisation and a real big hurdle to overcome to get back online again. Now, when we talk about the fact that people say it doesn't happen to them, in reality, this is an old study from last year in 2025. The stats say that 3 of 10 non-profit organisations have experienced some sort of cyber attack or security breach that has caused them issues. Now, if we think that's who's been reported as having a cyber breach or a security breach, how many companies have also had issues that they haven't reported because either they've been very small and minor and haven't had a huge impact, or maybe they just haven't been aware of it yet. So we can say 3 in 10, but that's just in 1 year. I would imagine that the actual numbers are slightly higher than that. So what can we do to try and help protect you and try and keep you safe and secure when these things happen? So by now you're probably sitting thinking, well, this is starting to sound really expensive and there's a lot of technologies here and we're not quite sure how we can protect ourselves around this. But the good news is there is a lot of things you can do. And the really good news is that some of these things don't actually cost any good money or any money. And they're quite easy to implement. So we're going to give you a few pointers here and now as to how you can hopefully help protect your organisation against some of these things. So the first thing is train your people. Pretty much every hack attack that we see or cyber attack always starts with someone doing something, whether it's a user who gives their user details or gives access to something they shouldn't have given access to, or they click on a link in an email, or they do something. And generally, a lot of the attacks all start with a phishing attack. So the kind of general way that this works will be a phishing attack will come along first. And then the phishing attack will then lead and give the details to someone else who can then take that information and then start another attack. So if you can manage to get your users and educate them to stop that first, then it means we can stop a lot of the initial attacks and stop things dead before they go any further. So training your people, and quite often this can be something you can do internally. So we can just send out, sample emails to people to let them know. But there are also some online tools which come in a variety of different levels that you can sign up to, which will give users training videos, regular email reminders as to what goes on. And we can also do some things like simulated phishing attacks. So we can always just make sure that users are aware of what's going on. The simulated phishing attacks are always a nice one for me. So even here in Kik, we have a monthly email attack that comes through. So we never know when it's going to come. It comes at a regular random time. And it's all different every time we get one. So it means that we're actually thinking, every time you see an email and you see a link, you think, is this maybe one of those phishing attacks that we should be thinking about? Should I be clicking the link here? Or should I be maybe thinking this could be a bit suspicious and really think twice before I do something? So anything at all you can do to help train your people and make sure that they know what they're doing is going to be a benefit to your organisation. The second thing, which again is a nice freebie, is just encourage reporting. Make sure we have a no-blame culture in your organisations. So even as a kind of cyber professionals and working in an IT company, we still have people who click on emails and do things that are wrong. So it's not that it's by clicking on an email or doing something that you're an idiot and that you should really be doing better. People make mistakes, especially in high pressure organizations or high pressure situations. You maybe see something that flies past quickly, you've got something else that's on your mind. It's very easy to click a link or click a button. And it's only after you've clicked that button that you think, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. So make sure you have a no blame culture in your organization. Make sure that people know that they can just tell, either raise a service desk ticket or tell their manager or tell someone that they might have potentially done something. Quite often, we'll get calls through to our service desk with somebody saying, I've got this email, I've clicked on it, and it turns out it's benign, there's nothing wrong with it, it has actually been a legitimate email. It's much better to actually have someone check that, double check it and make sure, because if someone manages to tell us before it becomes a major incident, then it's much easier to change it and stop it from happening. So again, we've got two things here between training people and encourage reporting. That means that we've got nice cheap options to allow people to go through and save anything before it actually happens. The third thing we've got is to strengthen your access security. So, this again is fairly simple. Make sure that people have got strong passwords. Talk to your users and make sure they don't use the same password between their personal accounts and between their corporate accounts. because, for example, if they use the same email address and to log into their Amazon account and Amazon was hacked, then the user then have that email account and password that they'll try and use against their corporate accounts. So every time we can get users to have use good passwords security, it means we don't have a link between the two and we stop the hacker in their way. You can tell your users there's things like password managers out there that are really good, that mean that you can generate random passwords and secure passwords and save them. So it makes it easier for them to make sure that they keep themselves secure. And they can keep that for either the work personal usage in the work or also for their personal usage at home. So there's options around that. And again, you're making life easier for the end users, so you're actually making their job easier at the same time as improving your security. The other thing we have around the passwords and so on is there's a lot of new technology around multi-factor authentication and things like password with logins and phishing protection or phishing resistant MFA. And in most of the systems you use online, so for example, if you're using Office 365 or you're using Gmail for your username and passwords or for your email systems, they all come with a free MFA option that's available with them. You should be looking to use them, so get them turned on and use them as much as possible just to make sure that you protect yourself as much as you can. The basic one will probably cover 90% of use cases. There are some additional functionalities, so sometimes we get, for example, users will say, well, we can't use MFA because either users don't have phones or users use multiple PCs or multiple people have to log into this one account. We have solutions around that, so you can talk to us and we'll give you some pointers. Some of them will be for a small charge, but again, a minimum charge now versus having to pay tens of thousands of pounds in recovery costs later on versus the reputational damage you might have. It's worthwhile spending that little bit of money just up front if you have to. And as I say, some of it can be free. Also among the strength and access security, it's some just around some basic hygiene or what we call hygiene. So every time a user leaves your organization, make sure you tell your IT department or make sure their account is disabled. A lot of attacks happen from users who've left the organization, their email address and password still active, and somebody managed to hack that account. And people aren't aware of it because of the fact the user's not logging in actively, so they don't see the attack happening. And that can be enough that users can get in. So for example, if you think a user might have some personal details about some of your clients or donors, it's been hacked into, they can access that, they can pull that back out again, and you've got a real problem. Along the kind of user accounts, it's also just make sure that users only have as much permission to things as they need to have. We quite often see, especially in smaller organizations, where maybe a manager will have access and they'll have global access or global permissions to everything. That's fine if they need to have that level of access, but try and then split that off. So they've got a normal day-to-day account and an admin account. Again, additional admin accounts don't cost any money in most services and most solutions. So it doesn't cost any additional money to spread that out. And it means if they are hacked and their main account, their day-to-day account's taken over, they don't have full access to absolutely everything that's in the organization. And the kind of final level here, keep your system secure. So make sure that when that pop-up comes up and says we want to reboot your machine to apply new patches, or in your browser when it pops up in the little box at the top saying please restart your browser so we can apply some patches, they're really important. A lot of the hacks that happen are due to bugs in code, and the only way we can fix those bugs in code is to make sure that people reboot themselves and make sure their systems are up to date. So always make sure we do that. So that's on the kind of 4 things there we can do, which don't really cost much money. But the other thing we can do to make sure we try and protect yourself is just assume that an attack will happen at some stage. So we've already spoken of the fact that 3 out of 10 organizations will be attacked in any one year. So you can almost guarantee that within 3 years you'll have some sort of attack happening. And what we often see is that when users are attacked or when companies are attacked, there's a bit of a panic. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to recover from it. They don't know how to talk to people. So put a basic plan and try and think exactly what you need to have and what you need to have in place and contact details, so that if something does happen, you've at least thought about it and you've got a good idea of what's going on. So you'll see quite a lot of stuff online. There's still a lot, especially around the government organisations, Scottish Government, around the incident response planning. There's some really nice templates there as well. But we can kind of take it down into 4 different areas. So first of all, assume it is going to happen to you at some stage. So get some sort of incident response plan in place. Response plan should have some details around who you want to contact. So if you imagine that your email system and your messaging system has gone down, how would you still manage to contact these people? So, for example, a lot of companies will look at setting up things like WhatsApp groups or messaging contacts and keeping them on all the key contacts' mobile phones, so that you're not relying on your corporate infrastructure to be able to keep in contact with people. So you look at your senior management people, your IT providers, your marketing people, if you've got anybody there, maybe kind of team leaders, people you need to involve in all the decision making if you had an attack, and have all that ready to go. The other thing is print it out. You don't know that, for example, that your systems might be offline, so having paper copies or backup copies somewhere that you can get to easily is really a critical area. We spoke earlier on about, if you're a ransomware attack and making sure you get things for backup. It's also good now to think about, okay, if we had a failure, how would we recover? What's the most important things to get back first? What can we leave to the last? Do we have everything we have that needs to be restored is there? Are we backing things up as often as we have? Are there certain users we need to prioritise to get their information back before everyone else? And have we done a practice run so that we know exactly what we need to do? So understand your data, understand what's there, and get things back. Also, maybe look from your data point of view as to whether you've got some fallback paper ways of doing things or non-IT related ways. So maybe, we've got a corporate diary, or you've got some clients you look after. Well, maybe once a week somebody should print that out and stick it to the wall, just so you've got a backup copy should the worst happen. And whatever you do in the plan, even if it's as simple as plan, at least you've thought about it. So when you've got the real issue where you're in this kind of high stress situation, a plan or something's happened, even if the plan doesn't cover that particular circumstance or that particular issue, at least you've got a general plan that you can build on. So you've got something you can adapt rather than trying to start from blank and start from absolutely nothing. And in the really kind of high pressure attack system where your systems are all down and you've got people screaming at you, having something to start with is at least a start. And you'll find that most, maybe even 50, 60, 70% of what you have in that plan will fit what you need, and then you can adapt as you go from there on in. So start with a basic plan. And again, talk to us. We've got some logistics, and we can point you towards some templates you can use to get things started for your incident response plan. So we've hopefully not scared you too much. I always like to go back to the old crime watch and make sure you sleep well tonight. And how we can help to make sure you sleep well is that we've got a few services around with Kik that will help you make yourself nice and secure and keep on top of all the security. So I'm just going to quickly go through some of the things we have. So we've got a service called Kik Secure. If any of you are existing Kik customers on the tech side, you should already get your monthly email through from Kik Secure that gives you an idea of what your current security posture is. And we put that together to try and prioritise and give you some idea of where you should prioritise the money and where you should prioritise your efforts to try and close down any security holes that you have. We do that free for all our customers, but we also have an additional service, Kik Secure Premium, where we then come in and look at the score and work with you to help close down those loopholes and make sure that we keep everything as secure as possible. So the big thing to remember is if you've got 2 or 3 customers that are being hacked, whichever one's the easiest attack victim will be the one that they'll spend more time going after. So anything you can do to protect yourself will help. I always like to think of security as building, layers of walls around your organization. So if you've got one more wall than the next person, they'll attack the easier person than you. On top of that, we've also got consultancy services. So if you want to talk to us and get us in to look at how you do things and help you with, for example, incident response plans, we've got some people here who can come in and talk to you and talk you through best options and how to do things. I also mentioned, this is probably one of the kind of biggest things is around user training. So we've got some user training and phishing attacks, simulation attacks that you can have with us as well. We've got that at various levels, so it can meet whatever requirements you have, whatever budget you have. So that, for example, will give you monthly emails with some training videos, some little quizzes to allow people just to keep on top and remember what they're going to do. Because the real thing with the user education is familiarity is really what makes things keep on top and make sure that they're always aware of what's going on. And should the worst happen and you have an incident, we're always here as well, where you can come and we can help you clean up the mess and get things back up and running again. So we do this with companies all the time. We manage to get things restored back from backup. And we can also look through log files to try and tell you exactly what happened and take you through the kind of how you can then communicate and give you some nuggets of information that you can pass it back to end users or to your customers. So quite often it's quite important to be able to tell what the level of the breach was, what information's been accessed, so you can then go back and report that. So again, we can help you with that with the post-incident support. We've finished the slide deck for now. So we'll open up now to any questions and answers.
Yep, so I've got a couple at the moment. Stuart, but feel free, anyone, to stick them in the box if something's came up or into your head through the webinar itself. First was, is there anything we should prioritise securing first, Stuart? So, things like email, data, or devices.
So I mean, I think the first thing is generally how people log in. So it's authentication mechanisms is the big thing that people want to do, and that covers all your devices. So for mobile phones, it could be making sure that people have got either passcodes or face or passprint, something to make sure that people just can't pick up the phone and use it. For devices, it would be making sure they've got strong passwords, maybe biometrics. So with Windows, we can have either Face ID where it can do that. And these are all really secure, but they also come under the branch of multi-factor authentication. So again, for things like cloud-based services, make sure you've got your MFA enabled to make sure it's really difficult for people to be able to hack through. And also look at extra systems. So maybe you've got remote access through VPNs. You maybe got access through things like RDS, remote desktop servers, or terminal servers, or Citrix. It goes by lots of different names. But try and make sure those systems have multi-factor authentication on them as well. So the biggest thing is multi-factor authentication, I guess, and make sure that's up and running, and that will make sure you protect most of your systems.
Perfect. And then the second one was just around if we offer initial assessments or audits that would allow someone to get visibility into potential weaknesses that they've got. Yeah,
absolutely. So we've got the Kik Secure service, which is primarily based around the cloud-based. So that's against things like email, SharePoint, OneDrive, and so on. But we can also come in and look at your whole infrastructure. So if you've still got servers on board or services in your computer room, or kind of other kind of unusual systems, maybe finance, things like Razor Edge, or financial systems, anything at all, then we've got a fairly wide range of skills in our consultancy service. So we can come in and we can talk to you around how things are configured and give you either some high-level advice as to what you should do, or we can make some really in-depth analysis and give you, come in and actually make the changes for you, so we can tie things down and make sure your organisation, your systems is as secure as possible. And we do that quite often for from large organisations down to small organisations. So I think it's quite nice that we've got people who see some of the kind of high-tech ways of doing things, because quite often we can give you low-tech versions that give you the same kind of protection, but for more of a kind of charity or non-profit budget.
Yeah, and that's probably worth mentioning, just now touching that, Stuart, is that we do have customers at all sort of different levels of their own cybersecurity journey, and they want to go to different stages, so that we do have different options, around the cybersecurity awareness. There's sort of some of the lower level, more cost friendly options, and then going all the way up to sort of premium, all you can eat. So if you want to reach out and discuss different options and where you're best to start, all of our account managers are pretty well versed at dealing with different sizes and different types of customer. And then also one other thing as well, if you're looking for sort of low level starter resources, I'll usually point customers towards National Cybersecurity Centre. There's plenty of good stuff on their website for initial tips that you can send out to your staff if you're looking for somewhere to start, and there's all sorts of videos and free content there as well.
Yeah, I was going to say there's the SVCO. I always get their initials back to front there, but they've got a really good website which got some really good kind of help around there. And that's where if you look for, they've got a PDF which I think is called the Responding to Cyber Incident. It's a kind of A3 PDF. You can print it out and fill in some blanks, but it's a good kind of start for an incident report or incident response plan. And at least gives you something you can build on from there.
Okay, perfect.
Anybody else got any other questions you want to add in? Nothing yet, Joel?
Not seen anything else come through now.
Well, I think as it's almost lunchtime, and it's a really nice day out there. I hope it's sunny where you are. It may be time just to call it a day for now, and just to say thank you very much for your time.
Yep, thanks very much. Sure, if you just go into the last final slide as well, that I think that has both mine and yours details. If anything does pop into anyone's head, or you just want to reach out and for a sort of general discussion, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, thanks very much for joining. We'll hopefully speak soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. Thanks all.